I'm honored to introduce this next panel. Hilary Link is the new president of Allegheny College, and she's building on the excellent work of Jim Mullen and Richard Cook. Chris Nelson will facilitate this conversation. She's an Allegheny trustee and a former colleague of mine on Second Nature's board of directors. Before I turn it over to Chris, a few words about Allegheny. Allegheny College signed the President's Climate Leadership Commitments in January 2007. In doing so, Allegheny College became only the 15th higher education institution in the United States to do so. And since then, the climate leadership demonstrated by Allegheny College is extraordinary. The panel will go into these details, but Allegheny College engaged its Board of Trustees prior to and after signing the commitment in order to ensure the commitment was an institutional priority. The board has navigated 2 presidential transitions since Allegheny signed the commitment in 2007, and the climate leadership commitment was a topic of questioning and a point of emphasis for each incoming president when they were interviewed for the presidential role. Because of this, the commitment, the goals and strategies outlined in Allegheny's Climate Action Plan have stayed the course and not lost momentum. This year, Allegheny College became the first campus in the state of Pennsylvania to become carbon neutral, and only the 8th campus in the United States to meet this goal. The fact that they've been able to become carbon neutral in a major coal mining and fracking region of the United States illustrates true climate leadership and deserves recognition. Allegheny's story is one to be shared, recognized, celebrated, and replicated, and I look forward to hearing from each of these extraordinary leaders. On a personal note, in 29 years as a college president and a Western Pennsylvania native, I have had the opportunity to observe the Allegheny story firsthand. Richard and Jim are longtime respected former presidential colleagues. Richard, Chris, and I have served together on the Second Nature Board of Directors. With this organization, Richard and I go back to the first meeting in Washington of the former American College and University President's Climate Commitment in 2006, 2007. And if you look at the website, I think you and I may be 2 of the only remaining recognizable faces. Aren't many. Their story is remarkable and is a model for all, so stay tuned. I think you'll find many takeaways from this session. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Chris Nelson to start the conversation. Welcome.
Thank you, Scott. And thank you all for being here as we reflect on the importance during a presidential transition of being very clear about a climate commitment that the institution has committed to, and to making very clear what the expectations are for the next leadership team. I know many of you have gone through a presidential transition since you became signatories of a climate commitment. And when we're finished here with the panel, I hope that you will add whatever good experiences you have had with that so that we can add it to the mix of best practices. And I know from talking to some of you that you will be going through a presidential transition soon. So we hope that this panel and our comments might help you as you think about navigating that period in your institution's history. Just to give you a little bit more context on Allegheny, we are a liberal arts college in northwestern Pennsylvania, as Scott mentioned, a student body of about 1,800. We have a very small sustainability office, and by that I mean she is here. Kelly Bolton, without whom we would not be here telling our story. So thank you, Kelly. And like many of you, we, with demographic changes, have had challenges with enrollment over the last 5 years or so. And along with that, the pressures for budget cuts. But despite all that, we have remained quite committed to our climate neutrality goal for 2020. Hasn't been easy, but we have stuck to it. And part of that, I think, is because we have what some people call institutional resolve. I prefer to say that we have climate action in our DNA. And I thought we could start perhaps with Richard, talking about why it is that we have climate action in our DNA. What is it about our mission that you helped to create early in your presidency that has helped us through this transition from Richard to Jim to Hilary?
Thank you, Chris. Well, I'm the past. Jim's the almost present. Here's our future over here. So you've got multiple generations of story. My job is to simply sum up 200 years of history in 3 minutes. So let me give that a try. Environment was not part of our classical mission as a traditional liberal arts college. And there are colleges you think of, Northland in Wisconsin, College of the Atlantic, Marlborough College. Those are colleges where you just know that was one of the reasons for their existence. That was not us. So why did this happen? And I think it has to reach back. We're 30 miles from Titusville, Pennsylvania, where you know that Drake's Well, the first oil well in the world, was drilled. So we come from oil country. We had a full geology department, which was pretty rare. Many of you probably don't have a geology department. Allegheny did. 1970 was the first Earth Day, and it's no coincidence, I think, that in 1972, members of the geology department and other natural sciences formed one of the first environmental sciences department in the United States at the undergraduate level. So that's part of our background. Yours, it's not an essential part, but it gives you some context. From that establishment of an environmental science program, which was multidisciplinary, evolved a very wide-reaching program that became part of Allegheny's academic program. It broadened into areas of political science, economics, philosophy, very, very broad. So there is a heightened level of student and faculty engagement and interest that I inherited when I came to the college in 1996. My own background is physical chemistry and eventually environmental policy. So I certainly was geared that way. I know I hit it off well with the department. They invited me in to see student presentations, or even on occasion, they trusted me to give a lecture. And so that connection was there early on. And I was really impressed with the level of work that was being done by the faculty and the students. There was an informal group that had gathered, and from time to time we would meet and talk. And probably somebody put the idea in my head, but I formalized it by making an ad hoc committee, Task Force on Environmental Responsibility. Two of those original members are sitting right here, and I want them to stand so that if you have questions later, these are the people that know the answers. We don't. But Eric Pallant from our ES department, long-serving faculty member, and Kelly Bolton, if you'd stand just so people can identify you later. Thank you. So these are the people who can tell you actually what the real history was and how it was done. I will just note that as a physical chemist, I can't resist saying that Svante Arrhenius, Nobel Prize winner in chemistry in 1896, did the calculations that projected global warming from CO2 emissions. It goes way back, it goes back into science, and so anybody that's been surprised by this didn't study their chemistry. What we did with that environmental task force, they drafted a simple set of environmental guiding principles for the college. It's a harmless-looking one-page document. We kept it simple, we kept it straightforward, but it was meaningful. We discussed it with the senior staff. We had it approved by the faculty and eventually the Board of Trustees. I can't overemphasize how important that one-page document is. And then when I realized here last year that we're still using the same document, one page, unaltered, not even a date on it, but that has been so important that it really has guided our strategic planning. It became a guiding force for the college, and this is something that I think other institutions can, and some have already. Scott told me that they've adopted it at his institution. It can be a guiding force for you. So these, since 2000, the year 2000 when we adopted them, they've really been helpful in guiding our priorities, our budgeting, our strategic planning, our decision-making, our building program, campus operations, hiring, purchasing, contracts, and affiliations. And just let me make a note about affiliation. When Tony sent out the invitation for colleges to join him in his unlikely journey, we became a signatory within hours or days. It was no more than a few hours, I think. I took it to the senior staff, the staff meeting. They were comfortable with it. I referred to the guiding principles. I contacted Eric and the task force within probably minutes, but hours. They said, yes, we should become a signatory. I called Chris on the phone. I explained to her what this is, and her response was wonderful. She said, well, why wouldn't we do that? That's who we are. That's part of our principles and our mission. And so with that, I had the authority to go ahead and sign, knowing that we had support. I knew that Chris on the board would have a sense of the board and would provide the leadership on the board we needed. So we never really took it to the board until later. We informed that we became a signatory. There was no problem at all. And so this is because we'd been operating that way already. So the groundwork was set, and you too can set that groundwork. Many of you have. I'm preaching to the choir here. So after making the commitment, we took every advantage of what becoming affiliated with a national movement provided. For example, we jumped on the opportunity, the invitation to join the Clinton Climate Initiative, provided incentives and publicity for, and even an opportunity to be with Bill Clinton to go out and hire engineering expertise to survey our whole campus. We adopted a lot of efficiency measures that led to instant savings, which we turned around and reinvested in the program. We took those savings and we didn't just use it for other things. We said we're going to have this kind of revolving fund that we would use. That led to immense savings in energy and water, for example. Our new buildings and retrofits were held to LEED standards. Ground source heating is now expected on campus. We're restoring our original building, Bentley Hall, and that is going to be retrofitted to LEED standards. And some unidentified trustee made it possible to put in the ground source heating and cooling for that historic building. It was going to go over budget, but we had an angel who helped us in understanding this is an investment. So we do life cycle costing. It's easy to justify. This will save so much money going forward that we will turn that into the revolving fund. Passive solar, high efficiency building envelopes, rain gardens, green roofs, and a high-tech composting system that has allowed us, I believe, to totally 100% get off of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. An amazing project that takes waste food and landscaping materials and turns it into high-quality things. So the academic curriculum is thoroughly embedded, has embedded this idea of sustainability. It's marvelous to watch the students and faculty. Eric and his colleagues expect our students to do significant things, expect to research it, to defend it, to present it in professional settings. They make them dress up and come to the Board of Trustees and make a presentation, or to the senior staff, or to the outside world. And this has become really an integral part of our academic program and our education for our students. They're given real responsibility, and these students do amazing things. So our commitment is well known. We refer to it frequently. We pull out those guiding principles if we're starting to get resistance on doing something that is in the long-term best interest of the college. And it has become part of the college's trademark now of being known for doing this. So for those of you who have said to me, but I have so many other things on my plate, how do I choose this over this? It's a matter of both and. You work it integrate it into the system, and you will find that marvelous things will happen. So there's the history.
Thank you, Richard. And remind me, you were president for 11 years?
12.
12 years. 12 years. And you can see how, in fact, climate action is in Richard's DNA. Jim, I'd love you to talk about how it is, as we went through the search process for you to recruit you as Jim's successor. How did you learn about the climate commitment, and how did it inform your presidency?
Well, it's many of you have gone through processes like this. You do your homework, and it was very easy for me. Number one, I knew of Richard and his distinguished career in this area. And it was a career that extended beyond Allegheny, the difference that he has made in this. So I knew of his leadership. And every document that I read throughout the process, both those provided by the search consultants and documents that I reviewed that I was able to obtain through the process, referenced the guiding principles and referenced the institution's commitment. Then when I visited the campus, well, before that, I went to the airport interview, and it came through in not only one question, but a series of questions about my personal commitment to this institutional challenge that Allegheny had accepted. Then I visited the campus, and what really struck me was every person I met with, either in a group setting or individually, spoke of their commitment and their understanding of the commitment that Allegheny had made around climate. And the one that was particularly telling for me was Dave McAnally, whom some of you know as the very successful president of Coe College, was the CFO at the time at Allegheny. And we had lunch, and he spoke at length about how this had to be done and the commitment that he felt. And I remember saying to myself, if the CFO wants to make this level of investment and feels it passionately, and they weren't reading from cue cards, this was, as Chris said, in their DNA, that means something. And that resonated with me, both because of my sense of commitment to the issue, but I grew up in an era when college presidents really were the folks that the nation looked to lead. We remember Ted Hesper, Clark Kerr, other individuals. And this was a chance to be part of something where this small college in Northwest Pennsylvania could establish a leadership role in the nation and make a statement. And I remember saying to my wife, if part of our job is to inspire young people to citizenship and to leadership, what better opportunity could I have than to be president of an institution that has set this platform? I owe Richard and Chris and my colleagues because they had the platform set for me. And I didn't have to convince anybody about what we were trying to do. And I will say finally, when I met with Chris as chair of the board, and she resonated so powerfully with this mission, the relationship of a president to the chair is critical. And I never questioned, in good days or bad days on the budget, that I didn't have the support of the chair of the board on sustaining this issue. So it was really, it's so clear. It was the DNA of the institution.
Oh, thank you, Jim. It's so easy for a new president to walk in and say, well, this was the last president's big passion. I'm going to try something different. I'm going to make a name for myself in some other field. And you, in fact, had a second passion, which was civility and public discourse, and you were able to develop that and make a name for Allegheny in that area also. But you continued this, and we became signatories to the resilience commitment. You continued more investments in climate issues. What motivated you to keep it going? I mean, I can understand through the transition saying, yes, 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 Richard did a great job, I'm going to keep it going. But you were 11 years with us as president. What motivated you to continue beyond those first few years?
Well, first of all, I don't think that commitment to civility and public life and how we talk to each other around public issues is separate and apart
Good point.
from our commitment to climate. We've heard for the last day about the need for us to be able to find ways to talk about the importance of this issue across difference. So I saw them as very complementary. And actually, as the climate commitment, as a wonderful case study around how we could create policy and have civil discourse around it. That's the first thing. Number two, on a personal level, our two kids grew up at Allegheny. And again, I think if you're going to try to inspire a young generation to service and to citizenship, you ought to stand for something. To back off of the climate commitment, not only would I have had to look at 1,800 students, I would have had to look at my own two kids as they were preparing to go to college and say I cared, but I didn't care quite that much when it got hard. And the third thing was, you had a position of national leadership from an enlightened self-interest point of view. Allegheny College is leading the nation on this issue. Our faculty are leading on it. Our board is leading on it. Our students are leading on it. How could I walk away from that kind of opportunity for national leadership for the college? I never saw it as sort of this was Richard's. I was grateful to Richard for the leadership and to you and the board and to my colleagues for the platform again that you created and the opportunity you created.
Okay. Thank you. Now, Hilary joined us as president just 8 months ago, not even 8 months, July 1st. And you came on as president of Allegheny, Hilary, in an era that is quite different from when Jim stepped into the presidency. I'm sure everyone here would agree that the challenges in higher education are more profound right now. There are a lot of trade-offs that need to be made. I wonder how you're thinking about those trade-offs as you now, 8 months into your tenure, are dealing with.
So as any new president or any older president can remember, the first year is really hard because you're just getting issue after issue thrown out at you. It is a very different moment. I stepped into the my mic's not working. I stepped into the presidency at a really interesting moment, and I remember saying to the search committee that they had done something remarkable, setting up a remarkable situation for whoever the new president would be, and I'm fortunate that ultimately that was me, in that Jim really led the college through a very difficult resizing. We reduced our student population from almost 2,200 to 1,800 strategically and purposefully to remain competitive, to really kind of resize to what we historically had been, although we had grown during some of the happier financial days, like many institutions. There was a downsizing of the faculty, a downsizing of staff. It had been a really hard time, and I had the benefit of stepping in as we were coming out of that and basically being told by the board, now you can start thinking strategically about where you want to invest. But the remarkable thing about that downsizing moment is that climate commitment was never sacrificed in that. And I think that's a really important statement. The other thing I want to point out, and I want to give a shout out to our CFO, Linda Wetzel, who's sitting up front. We are the 8th institution in the nation to reach carbon neutrality. We have the smallest endowment by a substantial amount of all of those institutions. We do not have a large endowment. I just want to read a statement that Kelly Bolton had included in a proposal that she shared with me because I think it's really important. She said, what we lack in resources, we make up for with creativity, scrappiness, collaboration, and integration. And I think, to go back to Chris's question, that really sums up my approach. We are a very sort of bare bones in many ways operation, but we managed to do some incredible things. And there's a creative aspect to all of that. The other thing is that in some ways this idea of this and that Richard and Jim have talked about is very much also part of the DNA of Allegheny. We have a whole curriculum that's predicated on the fact that students have to do, they're required to do a major in one discipline and a minor in another. And so this sense of looking at issues from multiple perspectives and finding ways to integrate different lenses onto the world is really how I'm looking at, okay, how do you balance the 100 priorities that you have with no money to do any of them? And so it's about being creative. It's about collaborating really, really closely. Kelly was early on my calendar, I will say. And as a new president, that means something, right? Because you're coming in and you don't know who's important and who's doing what and who you have to meet with. And the fact that she, as the director of sustainability, was one of the first people that I met with said a lot. And even going through, you know, it was in the search profile, it was in the search committee questions. But again, it's hard to make it a priority. To me, it's about how do you do this integrated with other priorities. So the other quick thing I'll say is that I'm really turning some of my attention generally to economic development in Meadville and in Crawford County, our local community. But for me, the concept of sustainability, climate commitment, and resilience of the local region is a huge part of that. And so that's a way that I've been able to take this historic priority and say, yeah, I embrace that, and it's helping me as I reach out in one of my additional priorities with the local community as well.
Great, thanks. Jim, you mentioned how important it was to see in the documents when you went through the search process our commitment to climate action. While you were president, you also had an EVP search. So when Dave McAnally left to become president of CO, we went through a process for a new EVP. And you had in the job description for the EVP will provide critical leadership as the college maintains its commitment to environmental sustainability. So could you talk a little bit about the importance of getting the commitment into job descriptions at the EVP and other levels, and then also how to make sure that someone like the sustainability director is at the table when you and the EVP and others are working on the master plan or on the strategic plan?
Well, I think it's critical that the senior staff throughout the college, but particularly at the senior staff level, there is a commitment to the core values of the institution. As president of the college, you cannot be in every room. We were in the midst of a very significant campaign at the time. I was on the road a good deal. So it fell to Linda, and to Kelly, and to Eric and the faculty, and to the EVP, and to the provost, to be sure that in rooms that I could not be in, that the commitment was real. And the great part about that is I don't feel that there was ever a time in my 11 years at Allegheny that I had to check in on the commitment. I had to check in to make sure things were moving, but I knew that the people in the room, if I wasn't there, were leading with the values that Allegheny holds dear. When we developed our strategic plans, the first one was easier because we had a lot more resources. It was the heady days of 2009 and 10. The second time we went through the strategic planning process, we were in the process of deciding by choice we were going to become smaller. That, as my colleagues can tell you, that work is always done with a very strong sense of shared governance. So we had committees working these issues. We needed to have leadership in the room that held these values dear. And I think that one of the things we're very proud of is that through that entire process, there was never a question about backing up on this commitment. So it was critically important that we be sure that folks that were coming to join the team shared that DNA with us. So that's why we built it into all of our descriptions.
Thank you. Thank you. Hilary, I want to take you back to a phone call that we had last June. So this is before you officially joined. And the phone call had to do with the building that Richard mentioned. This is an iconic building on campus, 200 years old, our administration building. We were going through a restoration or in the early stages of restoration. We had already committed to using geothermal for heating and cooling. And we were committed to making sure it was LEED certified, but the question we were debating among ourselves was how high of a LEED certification should we be shooting for, and what's realistic in a 200-year-old building. So we had a phone call that had on it the architects who were explaining how challenging it is to work with a 200-year-old building and what it might cost to get to LEED certification or LEED silver, and not even knowing for sure that you would get there. We had finance folks on the phone call who were doing their job and telling us how this was going to be an overrun of the budget and such. And then we had on the call 3 trustees. We had the chair of the board, the vice chair of the board, and I were on the phone call. And we were there to express our commitment to being LEED silver, and to say that we would be willing to tap into board-designated funds, not the base endowment, but board-designated funds that we had control over as trustees to fill the gap if there was, in fact, a budget overrun. So, Hilary, you were in Rome, Italy, packing up your family to move to Meadville, Pennsylvania. You hadn't yet started. Why did you take this phone call? And what was it like sitting on that call?
Yeah, so I tell people all the time, I did something that nobody in there, I think I'm the only person who can actually say they literally moved their entire family from Rome, Italy to Meadville, Pennsylvania. And so I was there, and I was in that crazy taking on a presidency process of, you're doing 2 jobs at once, because I was finishing up my deanship of Temple University's campus there while I was packing up the family and preparing to move to Meadville. I was intrigued by the phone call, and I remember this because, by the way, it was about 9 o'clock at night on a Friday in Rome. I was out at an event, and I remember standing outside and putting the phone on mute because there was all kinds of chaos in this piazza happening. But I took it because it said something really strong to me, that a call about one of the buildings being renovated on campus had this cross-section of leaders across campus, right? So the architects, the trustees, the finance people. It was such, and I will say that phone call, I remember it vividly, as you can see, but it told me a lot about the institution. And one of the interesting things it told me, going back to the point of we are not a particularly wealthy institution, is that there was real conversation on that call about whether we could afford to do this. Not, okay, therefore we're not going to do it, but this wasn't an easy decision. Oh yeah, let's just do it. Of course we have the money. This was a real conversation that went on for over an hour about, okay, we're committed to doing the highest LEED certification that we can, but we literally don't know how we're going to find the money to pay for it. And that's where the trustees were really generous to step in and say, this means something to us. And that, to me, has become a guiding moment as I've stepped into the presidency. Okay. This is clear that, when the rubber meets the road, we're going to prioritize this even at the expense of other things, because it is the truth at Allegheny that you have to make those kind of financial choices. For now, hopefully in the future we'll get to a better place, but we have to make those choices. But the fact that And I was more of a listener on that call, but an excited listener. The fact that when the choice came, the choice was we have to commit the money to do the highest LEED certification we can, because this is the iconic building on our campus. It's a symbol to everyone who goes through Allegheny, who works at Allegheny, and the fact that we were going to make that a priority spoke just volumes to me about the priorities of the institution that I was taking over, and that this was something that I was not going to back away from.
So, Richard, why don't you help us wrap this up? You have been chair of the board of Second Nature. You have seen a lot of schools that, with your encouragement, have signed on to a climate commitment. You've seen presidential transitions. Some of them work, some of them don't, in terms of maintaining the long-term action plans to succeed with the commitment. What would you say are the things that folks going through this transition to a new president should have at the forefront of their mind?
Well, I think first and foremost, the presidents must really believe in this. If the president doesn't talk about it, doesn't really believe it, it's not really going to take off. But that's not enough. It has to come from the top down. It has to come from the bottom up. The bottom said affectionately. You need allies, not a large number of them necessarily, but really effective forces within the faculty, within the student body, and ultimately within the board. So as they call it, the living logo of the institution, you as presidents in the audience here really need to know that and be part of it, believe in it. Some of you here are not presidents might say, well, how do I get my president that engaged? I think it's through just, if right now I get the feeling that if you came into Allegheny as president, you're going to eliminate the sustainability commitment. It'd be like saying I'm going to eliminate the English department. It's part of it. That happens over time, but it can happen strategically, small steps at a time, top down, bottom up. Secondly, it's to help everybody understand, including and especially the board, I think, that this is a strategic move. First of all, it's a good long-term choice. It's good for our world, but it's also good for the institution because you can make it part of your marketing platform. It's part of the reason students find and come to Allegheny. It's become one of our hallmarks. It also lends itself to making terrific student experiential learning projects. And this has become a huge area of student interest. They want to get engaged and involved in significant ways, and they do. I mean, Kelly's evidence of that. This was a student when I was there on a committee. Here she is. This is her life's work now. This is kind of indicative of what influence this can have on students. I would say, too, that if you do good work and you just keep your nose down and keep at it, that other people will recognize it. So I think we were the first inaugural recipient of the Council Undergraduate Research Student Undergraduate Research Award. This is part of the reason. We're one of, the Sierra Club's cool campuses. This is part of the reason.
Cool campus.
Cool campus. So
No, cool school.
cool school.
Cool school.
Right. So this is all part of a virtuous cycle that builds on itself. And so it's not a sacrifice. It's a strategic move.
Can I add one quick thing?
Yeah.
And I'm laughing looking at Kelly, because there have been multiple instances over my first 8 months where the students have held us accountable for things, right? Where we came back, we had done some changes to our lighting fixtures over winter break for security reasons. So this was like an interesting moment. And I had students contact me and say, I'm really concerned that the lights are staying on too long when we walk into the bathrooms. Why is that happening? And, Kelly is able to engage. So, talk to Kelly. But Kelly's able to engage with them in, make them teachable moments and really talk to students about there are always competing priorities. This is a priority. There are reasons why we're doing this. But it's gotten to the point where the students are calling us on it as well. So it's part of what we do at all levels.
And your students will be calling you on it too. If you neglect to do this, they'll be calling on you. One other thing I'd just add,
Sure.
It really helps to have presidents and past presidents and board people who are good friends. And this made the transition so much easier. And so we've always felt welcome back to campus by both of these presidents. And I think that's an important piece of the pie. Sure. That is, it's an institutional commitment, but it's also a colleagueship and friendship that is really important.
Great. So we just have a couple more minutes. You have the mic? Is there anyone who has been through a presidential transition that wants to add some thoughts or just questions about the process?
It's on? Oh, thanks. I'm Joe Burnett, neighboring Pennsylvania College. And first of all, I want to congratulate you. Really, hats off. It's wonderful work you've done. Now, to ask kind of the hard question, to bring this back to our campus or any other campus, can you say that there has been a measurable effect, either enrollment, giving, or a student outcome? You can take any one of the three, because all three are key metrics that really we need to convince our colleges to move forward. Thank you.
Good question.
I could kick it off and then defer to my colleagues. I know that in the 11 years that I was there, I think Richard alluded to the impact it's had in the classroom, and Hilary did as well. The opportunities for interdisciplinary learning, learning across the disciplines related to the environment, related to climate. I saw it every day. The department was nice enough to allow me to come in, even though I didn't have anywhere near the background that Richard had, to observe student presentations. I think we have one of the strongest departments in the country in environmental science right now. As I watched through the years that department grow, it is amazing the growth we've seen there. I would meet with parents and students who would come to campus. What are you interested in? It was environmental science, and the college's commitment was evidence of that. In terms of fundraising, we are about to conclude a $200 million campaign. I can tell you that this was a real strength for us in terms of our fundraising. Very generous trustees, very generous members of the alumni community, foundation community that gave because of our commitment here. And then I think that last category, which is students, and Hilary alluded to it, students' commitment to making a difference in citizenship. This is something that students attach to. They do hold us accountable. They do feel they can make a difference. And I think it's preparing them for that role of citizen in a way that is very powerful. And to have the chance to see that every day was very meaningful to me.
Can I tell a quick story on fundraising?
Yeah.
I had a call from a past trustee. I think he was just coming off the board. He's a Texas oil man. And it was one of these calls where you hold the phone out here because you can still hear him. And Jack had a way of telling a story or getting his point across, and he said, "What's this stuff about climate and all that?" and a few curse words about Al Gore. And I allowed him to vent. And then you have to meet people where they're coming from. I said, "Jack, you know we're limited in our funding. You know that we want to be very efficient." And I told him a couple of things about how we're wasting money on heating and cooling and so forth. And I said, "You wouldn't want me to put the college in a risky financial position, would you? We want to be really efficient." Yeah, I agree with that. By the end of the call, long story short, and it was a long call, he said, "I'm going to send you a check for $100,000. So he didn't believe in climate change. He didn't believe in Al Gore, but he believed in the college using its funds to the best purpose.
And I can tell you that he's 97 years old, and I had 11 years of those calls, and he continued to give money.
And I'll tell you, I met with him.
Did you?
Actually, in
There you go.
Texas in the fall, so he's still out there.
All right. Is he still swearing?
He's still swearing. He's not as strong as he used to be.
I have a question to start with our moderator. Running through this entire story is a deep connection between the governing board and all of the campus. And without that, the transition you've been talking about would have been quite difficult. Can you say something about that chemistry, how it developed, what made it possible to have that kind of environment in which this grew and was transmitted.
I'm a firm believer that the most effective boards are the ones who party together. And Richard, yes. And I remember one of our board events in Florida where Richard had a band playing Rolling Stones and we were dancing. And it starts with that. I mean, it sounds silly, but it's personal connections because there are folks on the board like the Jack Corys of the world who do not believe in climate change. But if you have the opportunity to share and be friends at the same time that you disagree, you get to a better place. The board had been, it actually had been quite easy to get the climate commitment into the mindset of the board and funding for it. I think we're all still wrestling a little bit with divestment because there are folks on the investment committee who still question divestment. But I think it's going to come back on the table as an important discussion, but one where we try to act out our commitment to civility among the board members, and I think that's an important part of it to get us to where we are. And it was easy with each of these presidents to just be there for them.
And I should say that the current chair of the board, with whom I'm partnering very closely, is a geologist from our geology department and therefore also cares deeply about the environment. And so there's been board transition where that has continued to be a priority for the board leadership.
Yeah, and I would say that if across your boards, if you can find 2 or 3 real champions, that's all you need.
Yep.
2 or 3 champions
Absolutely.
to keep the topic on the table, to bring it up when resources are being discussed. You don't need the whole board, but you need just a few strong leaders. Yeah. Thanks, Judah. Anything else? Well, I think we have a break coming up for which you may all be very grateful. Thank you for your